Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. We got Mike and Steve on here with us today, and I'm excited to just dig into some partnership stuff with these guys. So it's kind of cool. I've got to be pretty good friends with them over the last couple of years. If you see Mike, if you're an Indianapolis investor, you've probably seen Mike all over the place and investment groups and commenting on this and asking for contractors about this and all this kind of stuff. He's very social on there, and his partner Steve, they do a great job and have a great partnership and business. It's cool to get to know them as they've made some trips out here to Indianapolis and just kind of communicating with them back and forth. So I consider them friends. I also consider them great colleagues and great for the Indy investor community. So fellas, excited to have you on here. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us this morning.
Yeah. So I know I really want to, as we were kind of talking back and forth about how we wanted to kind of gear this episode and what we wanted to kind of talk about, I realized like the partnership of your guys' thing is really what I want to focus on. So we'll get to that a little bit later. And I want to kind of give you guys time to talk about what you're doing and what you're doing well and some things you've learned and stuff. But it's been cool to see you guys' transition. And I mentioned that partnership stuff because I see it happen all the time, whether it's on a small scale or big scale. Honestly, just I was working with a team not too long ago, and we sat down and started doing core values with the two partners, and it was very obvious that they did not have the same core values, and their business like ended up splitting like 2 months later. And it's stuff that happens all the time, like not having the right vision, the same core values, or the same work ethic, and all those kind of things. And I think you guys do it really, really well. So I want to just give you kudos for that. And I do want to dig into that a little bit today, but starting off, Mike, why don't you kick us off here and just tell us a little bit about kind of your guys' background and kind of what you were doing and how you got into real estate investing in general.
Yeah, definitely. No, and thanks for having us on this morning again. Obviously we've become friends, the last couple of years, and I follow the podcast, and so it's an honor to be able to add some value to you and the listeners. So
yeah. I think I've actually tried to get you on the podcast before, and you're like, no, man, I'm not yet. I'm not up to podcast quality yet, but 100% you are. So yeah, excited to talk to you about this stuff.
As you know, it's business is always ever evolving, but just kind of like how we got started. I grew up kind of in a construction type of family. My uncle is a landscape architect and contractor in a high-end area of San Diego. So I cut my teeth with him, and then my dad owned a civil engineering company. And so I would, just work the summers and stuff for them growing up, and then went to college, got into like wine and beer a lot, and got out and like 2011, right when the job market was really bad, and was like, hey, I really want to work for a brewery. So I hit up a local brewery, Ballast Point, which they're nationwide now, and that's where I met Steve, and me and him just really connected. We'd always be talking like rich dad, poor dad, like all businesses and stuff, even though we're working at a brewery, which if you're working at a brewery, it's not a very lucrative thing to do. So about after 5.5 years of doing that, I got out and started to pursue real estate around the age of like 29. Started kind of working on my real estate license stuff, and then got an opportunity to start designing and having a team build out custom wine cellars and saunas for luxury home builders and clients in LA and San Diego,
which are amazing. I've seen some of your work, and every time I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. So,
yeah. It's been obviously a great opportunity. That's where I really excelled kind of my journey into real estate, is getting around those kind of projects and those kind of people. A lot of the people putting wine cellars into their house, they're real estate investors too. They all have a lot of money. So just picking those people's brains and really you learn a lot about ground up construction when you're working in, 10,000, 20,000 square foot homes. Yeah. So just doing that. And then me and Steve connected again. We were, always friends, like I was saying earlier, and we connected again about like 3 years ago, or 2.5, 3 years ago, when he moved up into Escondido, which is like a suburb of San Diego, where I was living, or grew up and kind of still live there. And he just started talking to me about wine cellar stuff. And then we started talking about businesses again. And, he mentioned wholesaling. And I just kind of got super, super hooked right there. I was like, oh, you can do something like that? Like,
And one of the best thing about it was like, as soon as we had sat down and talked about it, he calls me like 2 days later. He's like, hey man, this stuff is real. I'm like, I know, man, I know. Which is kind of funny because, like that, us kind of combining our paths again started when I left the brewery, right? And for me, I don't know, I've had too many jobs to break down and be here for the whole time. But kind of what had happened before the brewery was I was an entrepreneur. So I ran a few different companies, everything from landscaping to tattoo artists, right? Trying to find what I wanted to do. Anyways, fast forward to go to the brewery, me and Mike are hanging out, always, like you said, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then Dale Carnegie had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Right. And then as soon as I left the brewery, I started an oak brokerage. So I started selling oak barrels, wine barrels, whiskey barrels all over the world. And then I saw Mike's post those kick butt wine cellars.
Yeah.
And I was like, I sell barrels, you do wine cellars. What's happening? Let's hang out again. Let's hang out. And that's when we met at the cigar bar and started talking about the whole something thing.
Yeah, and then like in terms of like obviously us being in San Diego, we've done some wholesaling out here. Like I have my realtor license out here, so I have that. We're flipping houses out here, but the way we got into Indianapolis was about like 2 years ago. We were just actually talking to someone out here that was like a newer wholesaler, and they mentioned like, oh yeah, we've been talking to a lot of people in Indianapolis, and they actually mentioned Tyrone Johnson's name, and that's how I kind of got connected with Tyrone. And then we started going from there, and just I saw like the out-of-state investors group, and I saw these groups, and I was like, well, we had tried like Detroit to start out with. It's like a tough market. There's not a lot of people like helping each other out and connecting out there. So
Very volatile.
And then not only that, one of my cabinet makers and shops for the wine cellar business is out in Indianapolis. So we're like, let's give Indy a shot, and we just started getting traction out there, and bought our first rental in Shelbyville, and still have that. It's cranking. And
for the record, like everything that we've done, whether it be flip or wholesale, buy and hold, short-term, long-term, whatever it is, there's been a huge like lesson learned every single time.
Yeah, that's good.
Even with the first one, right? Especially out of state.
Yeah.
So that's pretty wild.
Yeah. We always look at like, markets like Indianapolis, it's always one market that I'm looking at, obviously, since I live here, since I invest here, since I'm doing all this stuff here, to talk to people from California and be like, hey, Indy's it's an easy market to do and things like that. And as they're coming in here, they think it's like, oh, well, everything's just going to work out perfect. I didn't say it was perfect. I said it's an easy market to make work, and you got to try some different stuff. But like you said, Steve, like there's lessons to learn on all this stuff. It's one of the things I love about this business is no matter what I'm doing right now, I can always do it better or more efficiently, or, whatever it is. And I think that's one of the things that's exciting about it, of really it becomes a math problem for me, which that's what I nerd out about and things. But yeah. I want to come back to something you guys said real quick here, because I think it's important. And we mention this all the time on the pod, but, when you said you started with Detroit, and, sometimes they weren't necessarily as friendly, or they weren't looking to help each other. I see that all the time when I'm going to masterminds and working with different groups around the whole nation, when I'm saying like, oh, well, we just do a podcast and we like collaborate with other people, or, hey, we just go to, we have a meetup and we go to RIAs and things like that. And everybody just kind of helps each other. We have Facebook groups and things. And they're all like, what are you talking about? Like, no, we don't do that. Like, it's pretty cutthroat in our market and stuff. And I think it's competitive here, but I think it's a great thing about the Indianapolis market and community is that everybody is looking to help out each other. And I would say if you're somebody that is looking to invest in Indy, or you've kind of sat on the sidelines or have a question that you've been afraid to ask, just ask it to somebody. Like if there is some people might not answer it, or sometimes might not give you the best advice, but just ask it and start connecting with different people and start putting that stuff out there. I think you guys have done a great job with that.
Well, not just with like, and that's all the way around.
Yeah.
Not just, contractors, agents, brokers, it doesn't matter. Even the sellers are different human beings too.
Mhm.
You know, Detroit does one thing, right? We gave that a run. We're like, maybe we should like touch toes in another place.
Mhm.
But out in India, for sure, was a
Mhm.
lot more, a lot more kind people, man.
Yeah.
You know, coming from big cities, it's kind of tough, you know, to dive in, and there is a lot more competition over collaboration in those markets.
Yeah. And I think one thing that also kind of why we use, or like one thing for us is like we have a very much abundance mindset. So we want to help other people out. Part of that is just because of who we are. Another part of that is just one of the first, big mentorship masterminds we, did. They and still are part of. They really stress like collaboration over competition, and it really makes sense because one way to really like I guess multiply your business is doing like JV partnerships, which we've done with you guys before, and really helping other investors out, because if you're at the top of their mind, they're going to bring deals to you and you can help them out. And not only that, it's just like, it's what's the book that I'm thinking of right now? It's maybe The Richest Man in Babylon, I think it is. And just like kind of like how things come full circle when you add value. And one thing about the indie investing community that I love is a lot of people like to keep it real. And when you first get in, I understand too, because I was there. Like a lot of people, some people will be like, oh, it's another, out of stater trying to come in. But I think if you can like get in there and establish yourself and show people like, hey, I actually care and I actually am going to do the homework, and I can add value to what you're doing too. I think that goes a long way. And that's why, like, over the last 2 years, it's funny. I even have people that are out there that are like, man, Mike, like Indianapolis better than some of the locals do. And it's just like really getting in there and understanding the areas, and understanding it's a street by street kind of thing out there is super important.
And that's one thing too that luckily enough we've been doing is like a lot of different real estate investors, like from different places in the United States, they're not going to their markets.
Mhm.
We actually go there.
Mhm.
It was funny because we just had a pretty long road trip from started off in Dallas actually, and then to Louisville up to Indiana, 09. And I remember Mike and I both looked at each other like, man, like as soon as we got back in Indiana and we were actually heading back to our Airbnb in Butler, we were like, man, it feels like we're going home. I was like, oh, thank God we're going home, dude. Like finally.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool to experience that. And it's different too, like you said, learning those streets, and like, especially, when you're planning on what properties you want to go for, like it's those street by street basis. That's like, if you don't know it, you're going to make the wrong move.
Yeah.
And
it's not just street by street. It also kind of goes like, it could be completely different. That street could be completely different in 6 months or whatever. So really, it's a really good tip. I think a lot of times investors, especially out of state investors, just that property is really just a number on a spreadsheet, or it's either red or green on their spreadsheet or whatever it may be. But for actually coming out and looking at it and kind of getting a feel for it and things like that, it just goes a long way. I don't think we can emphasize that enough for investors in whatever market they're in. Even if you want to be passive, you got to be active at least to just kind of understand what's going on and know where your property manager is talking about, or know what where your contractors are doing work and what the other houses look like. I think there's just something to be said for that.
Yeah. Also, too, in the beginning, like me and Mike, we're just like everyone else. We're nothing special. Like we have to wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
And we have to decide how to maneuver when the other one can't.
Yeah.
Right. So what can we do? What are our strengths? So, Mike having his construction background, man, like I remember our first trip out there, it's like, Mike was able to already contact, a few different contractors and stuff like that. So that way, when we got there, it was just breakfast, lunch, dinner, and actually meeting the people we're going to work with. So, we're real people,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're good guys, we're not bad guys. So by the time we actually meet these people and we start working with them, it just creates a bond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. So what's working for you guys right now, and how do you guys stay focused on what's going on? So I feel like you've got some Airbnbs, you got some rentals, you're doing some wholesaling, you're doing some stuff in LA, you're looking in some different markets and things like that. How do you guys stay focused and knowing like, hey, let's go after this, or hey, this makes sense as a rental versus a wholesale, or what you're doing there?
Yeah, I think it's well, first off, really defining like your goals are huge, like working backwards from your goals. And then when you're working in multiple markets, understanding what you want to focus on in those markets. So like take for example, like we have rentals in Indy Metro and we have rentals in Terre Haute, right? So Terre Haute, like we really follow like, okay, what's going on around there? There's the college, right? They're building the casino. Like for there, our strategy that we've been looking at is like, hey, maybe out here we'll focus on college rentals, right?
Yeah.
And developing that area around the college and where the college students go. So that's kind of been our focus there. You know, whereas in Indy, our biggest our focus on Indy is long-term rentals, short-term rentals, wholesaling and flip, right? So that kind of defining that, like that's what we're doing there. That's what we're doing in Terre Haute, right? Like Terre Haute, we're not as concerned with like flipping, we'll wholesale properties out there. Then which takes me to California, right? Because California is like really hard to do rentals out here. Like if you're doing a short-term rental, yeah, it could make sense, right? Like if you're building like say for example, like at one at Steve or my house, like, you know, we build an ADU in the backyard and we use it as a short-term rental. That's a strategy out here, but out here we really focus on just flipping and wholesaling, and getting into development deals with people. And then like Florida is kind of like a mix between, you know, rentals, wholesale and flips, just because that market calls for it. But like, you got to really define what you're doing in each one of these markets. And you got to know the different strategies too, right? Whether like, hey, is this a cash deal? Is it a subject to deal? Does it make more sense as a subject to for both sides? How about seller finance? We've seller financed our Airbnbs in Indy. And just knowing how to structure those deals and really defining what you're looking for, having like a really set buy box, right? That's what we've grown to know like over the last, especially years, because people just start sending you stuff, and you're like, well, this might not be something that I want, right? So really defining that buy box and defining your strategy on what you're doing in each market is super important, right? Because one strategy might make sense even in a city, right? Like even like maybe if we're over in Butler Tarkington area, which is an area we really like, that's where we got our first rental ever in Indy,
And
which is
seller finance.
Yeah, and seller finance and Airbnb. You know, really going like, well, hey, you know, does this make more sense as a college rental? Or does it make more sense as a long-term rental? Or how about traveling workers, right? There's always traveling nurses and stuff like that. So really defining your buy box and your strategies goes a really long way on how you can analyze deals. And obviously having the right tools in your pocket, like a deal analyzer, and having every single number that you need, because if you miss one number, then your deal that you thought you had as a deal is no longer a deal.
And then how to stay focused from an actual like business perspective is off of your values.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Me and Mike know that this is a grind. It's an absolute grind. It can get tiring. And what do you want to see for the end game?
Mm-hmm.
What's your goal here, right? Because we know how to utilize the strategies and look at our markets that way now. But what's up for the long term?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can wholesale anything, even creative deals.
Yeah.
But what do you want to keep for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's going to dictate also the market,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because now we're noticing, since everything's, kind of adjusting, we're taking flips down differently too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So which ones we keep ourselves and which ones we let go,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then our overall goal and path, even the goals that we set, it's like trying to stay focused on those is tough, because the tactics that we took and the businesses that we started, technically in the beginning, we thought we were starting one business. Okay. We thought we were we're starting a real estate investment company.
Yep.
Now, fast forward, we're looking back and we're like, man, like this is so crazy. Like, where do we, how do we wrangle this? And we started really understanding that we started 3 companies at once.
Mm-hmm.
So the craziness and all this stuff that we're feeling, we're like, oh, this makes sense, because we started 3 companies, not one.
Yeah, I think like really defining, like I kind of mentioned this earlier, but really having your goals defined and always reviewing those goals maybe once a month, or, what we kind of do is we do a goal review at least once a month to see where we're at.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning of each quarter, we really deep dive into our goals, because we feel like strategic planning needs to happen on a more regular basis than like a one time a year thing or a once a quarter thing, because if you have truly defined goals, you can work backwards, and that'll define your daily habits. So like creating that roadmap to where you want to go is super important. And it's, as entrepreneurs, and I'm sure you feel the same way, is like, it's a constant, like, especially from a systems and integrator standpoint, which is kind of what I do for our company.
Yeah.
It's a constant process of getting everything dialed in. And the more you can get in and dive in and automate your processes, the better things become. So that all starts with your goals.
We talked about this morning, right? And this is a great thing. I was, when you're setting your goals, are you really setting them? Right? Like, you can have a list of goals that are up there on the board.
Yeah.
But do you really have an action plan behind it?
Yeah.
That's like one thing that we've realized a couple of times. We're like, okay, well, we know we want to get there, but have we really drawn out that plan?
Yeah. And you can actually, they're actionable. That's what the big thing is too. You can talk about like whether they're SMART goals or FAST goals or all the different acronyms you could set for your goals. But really, it's not just like, hey, we want to do this, but we want to do this by this time and, this way and all those things, and digging into that stuff. So, and sometimes too, I love the fact that you guys are saying that you're reviewing those like once a month and coming back to them, because a lot of times when you're doing multiple strategies, it comes into like, okay, are we on track for our goal? Okay, and that can help you determine like what strategy you maybe need to use. So I know, famous last words from every wholesaler or flipper is always going to be like, oh man, if I only would have held on to this deal, or I only would have held on to this. But and the reality is sometimes you have to wholesale, sometimes you have to flip it to get the cash, because we haven't hit our number yet. We need to hit this number to be able to get this, to get our next 2 rentals or whatever it may be. So reviewing those goals on a regular basis is key to all that stuff. So
it's super good that you said that, because it's like, yeah, if you have to hit X amount of wholesales, but you're like, hey man, those last 5 were so good, we're keeping those. Then you're taking away from that goal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
You're like, you still taking away from that goal.
Sometimes you got to be like, I'm sorry, we can't keep it. We have to, we need this money, so we need to do this now. Or it's like, hey, we're doing pretty well. Let's go ahead and keep these next 3 because we're in a good position. So it's knowing where you are. So that's where the number stuff comes in. That's where that integrator piece comes in, like Mike was talking about there. And I know, Steve, we've talked before about, like you said, I kind of, knowing you guys a little bit, I kind of view Mike as the integrator and you as like the salesperson. Like that's kind of how I view you guys a little bit. And you said that you never wanted to be a salesperson or anything. Like, that's a salesperson. You talk a lot. You're a salesperson. But like, how do you guys split your roles, and like who's doing what and who's responsible for what?
That's been the hard part in our journey, because I was running a company, and it was hard to keep up, right? And at the same time, Mike had a full-time freaking W-2.
Yeah.
So it's like we had to really dictate what we wanted to do and how we did it, and that's evolved as we've gone on. Like, for instance, this past year, right? I mean, I've had to step in and do this integrator stuff that I'm quite frankly not. I mean, dude, I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I like to be organized, but damn, that's organized, right? Like building out full-scale automation systems that take easily 80 hours over of back-end engineering time in a system that we just had to, which is brand new. Right. Mike has had to step in and do all kinds of, we've all had to step in and do stuff that we don't normally do. Right. But now with Mike, so my brokerage took a back seat. I'm full-time real estate investing now, and handling, teams like that takes up so much time. And then, at the same time, now Mike's going to be able to go full-time. So now we're going to really be able to 100% clarify and delegate our roles where we need to be. Help out each other in different places that we normally might not have been doing recently. So
the way we did it initially is we defined, because acquisitions takes more time during the day. So we defined Steve as acquisitions, me as dispositions. So building our investor list, networking, private money lenders, which we kind of both do. and that kind of side of the business, and then also doing integration to a point, because sometimes it's hard for me. Well, now that I'm going full time and my wine cellar W-2, let's call it, is kind of going to a 1099 status. So it's going to be kind of like a residual income thing. But now that I'm actually able to deep dive in 100% focus on what we're doing, I'll be able to dive into some of the acquisitions systems that we have in place and kind of really dial in our KPIs, which are super important. But in the past, I've kind of had to rely on Steve for that, because he's the one sitting there every day seeing what's going on. But having that role defined is super important, because especially now I can take things off of his plate so he can just focus on the acquisitions team, which is obviously super important to acquiring deals. Yeah. So it's exciting to be able to kind of dial those processes in and really take a look at the overall picture. And we've always tracked KPIs, but man, they're so important to your business. I mean, if you don't know your KPIs, you really don't have a strong, understanding of where your business is at, right? And what kind of stuff you need to hit and where you need to invest your money into, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy to get shiny object syndrome in this industry, because you see one they're killing it with direct mail. Oh, I need to do direct mail. Another person's like, I'm killing it with SEO and PPC. And you're like, I need to do that. And I think like what a lot of people finally kind of realize is you got to like stick to what works for you, and everyone's kind of using a combination of everything. Yeah. But you got to figure out, oh, hey, well, maybe I want to do direct mail, but I want to focus on this target for direct mail. Like I want to farm a certain area, or I want to like focus on, some type of, property, whether it be, tax lien or whatever,
And you got to give him some big credit too. He left this out, is that the project management on these flips, right? It's probably too long of a story for this run, but we went through a lot on recently on the flip here in San Diego. And we started off with a GC, the whole nine, had to get rid of him. And then Mike had to come in and project manage that thing for the most part. We put our heads together. We know a bunch of people. We were from San Diego, so we have the resources. So we have all of our subcontractors in a row and how to do that, right? So that took up so much of his time as well, that at the end of the day, it's like, defining those roles, it's like that's natural instinct because of his background, right? So, major kudos for him to step in and do that, even with a W-2. Right? So I just wanted to add kudos.
Well, coming into your guys' partnership, I think that's where when I met you guys, like, okay, their partnership's going to work. Like you guys had something, and what it was is that I feel like you guys are different within who you guys are, and you guys are comfortable with who you guys are as well. So where I see some leaders or some partnerships form, and really there's buddies, and they're the same person on paper, the same personality and stuff like that. Well, two people that are the same leading a business gets a little tricky. When there's two people that are leading the business that are a little bit different, one can focus on a certain aspect while another focus on another aspect. That's where partnerships really work and goes pretty well and stuff. So love to see that from you guys. And I just say, like, do you guys have any advice for those people out there that are, I know you guys mentioned like Tyrone, he and Omari, kind of the same thing. Like they've been able to make it work with what they do, and you guys have been able to make it work too. Like, do you guys have any advice for those people out there that are like getting in this, like, hey, I think I could build a business with this person, or I think I want to be a real estate investor with this buddy or this person or whatever. What advice do you have for them?
We have a slogan. All right. You can't take this. We're going to trademark it. You can't put it on your I'm just kidding. It's, what I really love is that with partnerships, you need to get rid of the word I. It's we.
Yeah.
If I do something completely wrong, right, for the business or whatever, if he does something completely wrong, if we mess up, it's not an I thing. It's a we thing. I'll take the hit for Mike all day. He'll take the hit for me. And it's like, this is a we decision in anything that we do now. And it comes with gratification too. If I did something cool and it was like, man, like I did that, I'm so proud of it. That's a we thing. We did.
Yeah. I think there's a few things I would say for people going into partnerships. Like, luckily for us, like we are friends, and that doesn't always work. A lot of time it doesn't, but we're completely different people.
Yeah.
And we are good at different things. So that's why it works. And then also like we're able to be honest with each other and have disagreements. And even if we have a disagreement, it's like within a half an hour, we're totally good again. You know what I mean? Like we just know that. And then like really kind of sticking to our core values of our business, you know, it's like one of them is doing good business with good people, you know, acting with integrity and honesty, and you know, presenting and adding value to the people that we work with. And I think like one book that both of us really kind of live by is it's God, why am I drawing a blank right now? It's Jocko Willink.
Extreme Ownership.
Yeah, Extreme Ownership is one of my favorite books, and just like always looking at things on like, instead of like placing blame on a person or someone who works for you or your partner, like looking at things like there's always a thing that you could have done better that could have probably prevented the situation. And so we kind of live by that you know, rule of thumb too, is just taking responsibility for what your role is and everything. And we try to really define our roles with even our people that work for us in our company, and really giving them a roadmap of what we want them to do. So there's two things that I wanted to say to finish this part out is, for people that are getting into real estate investing, they're trying to do it alone. Like in my opinion, you have a long road ahead of you. It's to your benefit to find someone that you can eventually partner with and have a good partnership in my opinion. And also building JV partnerships with people. And then also just making sure that when you do work with someone, that you guys excel at kind of different things and can define your roles to like push your company forward. Because if you're both visionaries and you're not an integrator, or you're not willing to take on that integrator role, which helps the company, then you're going to butt heads and things aren't going to run as efficiently. So
heavy amounts of communication.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like a regular relationship, dude. Right. Heavy amounts of communication. And granted, right, everybody does it differently. This is just what's for us. And so heavy amounts of communication, heavy amounts of we, not I.
Yeah.
At the same time, you have to be super open-minded at what you guys want to do, right? Back to your core values, and get really good, if you can, at playing the good cop, bad cop. You know, utilize it, right? It's like if there needs to be a time, you know, to where Mike needs to come in and crack some heads, you know, and then if there's times where it's like I need to play that role, whatever, you know, be good at switching that up, man, and utilize your team.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned that, the whole communication thing. I kind of forgot about this part of it. So the company I consult for, Sharper Business Solutions, we looked at like all the different teams and all the different you know, organizations throughout the US that are doing real estate investing. We work like, you know, hundreds of them throughout the US. And when you look at like the really strong people that have the visionary and the integrator in place, they have a business running and things like that. The one key thing that we realized about them is that they communicated the same way. They had very different personality traits and very different personality profiles, but the way they communicated, they were usually on the same page. Those are the teams that were being successful. So Steve, I love you throwing out there too, of this, that communication piece is huge. Mike even brought up the whole transparency thing too. If you guys have to have honest conversations with each other, and then you'll be okay with it, you know, half hour later and stuff like that needs to happen. You need to be open and honest. I know people always ask that about Brett and I, like, hey, how did it work between you guys? Or why does this work so well for you guys? It's because we're transparent, and Brett knows I'm going to call him out on something. He's allowed to call me out on something. Like, it has to happen sometimes. So that's key. And I think it's also, you know, important too, is a couple of different things that you guys mentioned that I thought were really, really good, is going over the goals regularly, and then going over the KPIs, those key performance indicators. The fact that you guys are going over those regularly and on a consistent basis, you know where you're falling short. So you know not individually what you need to focus on, but as a team, as the we, you guys can focus on certain areas. If there's a number that's too low or a number that's very high and you guys are doing well, hey, how do we enhance this and stuff? So love the stuff. Great stuff, guys. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
I mean, as you know, with systems and data, I mean, it's such it's such an important part of the company, and understanding it and where you're spending your marketing dollars. And it's a constant process of dialing it in. So knowing those KPIs is so important. And then like we were talking about earlier, just knowing your different strategies too is like, man, if you get too caught up on one strategy, like for example, if you just get caught up on just wholesaling all the time, you're not going to know your other strategies and how you can really advance your company, right? So it's so good to educate yourself on the different exit strategies you can use in this world, I guess you could call it.
KPI wise,
definitely.
KPI wise too. It's like we had, you go up and down like shiny object syndrome. Okay, it's like if there's shiny object syndrome, and sometimes you just need to pivot. And you didn't make a move systems or whatever. If you do, there's a lot of people out there that are not letting you like hop in and try the system out, before you actually move forward. And be cautious of that, because then you end up putting all your beans in that platform, and it doesn't perform how you want it to, specifically KPI wise.
Yeah. Especially those companies that are like, oh, hey, can we try for a month? No, we're going to take a year. We're going to take a year charge for it, like right from the start. Like, be a little wary of those people. So been burned on that before, but so no, great stuff, guys. Really appreciate it. What's the one thing that you guys kind of moving away from the partnerships? As we finish up here, one last question for you. What's the one thing that you would maybe advise someone that's living out of state that wants to invest in Indianapolis? What's one tip you have for them to be successful?
You want to
Yeah, I would say really connecting with people that are operating at a high level in the Indy market, and really defining the ways you can add value. Like just coming in and say like, oh, hey, I can add value. Like everyone's saying that, right? Define the ways you can actually add value, get to know the people in the industry. Like even like us, like we're working on trying to understand what's going on in the different cities and who we should talk to, like on the city council or in this local governments and stuff like that, to like really understand from a development standpoint on what's going on. So really making those solid connections and actually going to your markets, because it shows like people that you actually care and that you actually care to meet them, you actually care to do business and learn what you're doing, I think goes a long way. And then, it helps out too, because then from a referral standpoint, that you're getting solid referrals on things. You're not just going on Facebook and posting like, hey, I need a contractor, and who knows who you're talking to, right? That's why I like really becoming with like friends with like you and Randy and Tyrone and Amari and James Story's like kind of our commercial guy, and really building those solid relationships. And it helps a lot, right? And then even now we have people that come to us and ask us, even from Indy, like, hey, you got an HVAC guy, or hey, do you know a painter or whatever, and then we can like add value back to, the people that we know and what they're doing in big deals. So I think like the biggest thing is just, connecting with the right people in those markets and actually understanding those markets. The out-of-state market is crucial.
And to be a little bit, I guess, so what I would say is, it's essentially what Mike's saying too, except for if you had to be, more granular from somebody who's just coming in or out of nowhere. Get your people in line to be able to have somebody walk some properties for you. Number one. Number two, find somebody that can help you run some numbers, because non-disclosure, you could be the best at comping in the world, but if you're comping with the wrong data, it's not going to work, right? No matter what. And then number three, kind of just like what Mike was saying, was connecting with your people to make your moves once you actually start taking things down. Property management, contractors, all that kind of stuff. And if you have all those people in line, as far as like the investor side goes, like what he was saying, hitting people up through Facebook or shoot them a text and saying, hey, I think I could bring value to you. Express to them how. Bring a deal, right? Bring something to the table and people will listen, because you guys know how it goes. Sometimes and not even just Indy, in general, in my life, my cousin texts me the wrong thing, I'm going to put his text message on the back burner, and I'm going to, be like, I'm going to come back to it later when I can, if it doesn't have that urgency to it, right? So,
that's what I would say. I mean, you have it. Yeah, that's one other thing, is having like a really great boots on the ground and like a couple realtors that you work with is super important. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like we have a dedicated boots on the ground guy on our team now that literally, you know, he's like kind of our general manager, I guess you could call it, for Indy. You know, he walks our properties, he helps us out with some property management, he helps us out, you know, he's a painter and a realtor, so he's got, you know,
we just seller financed him a car.
Yeah.
So he
There
can
you
get
go.
around
Yeah.
to doing these things for us.
Yeah.
So it was needed. What do you guys need him to do? You need him to be able to travel around. He needs a car. So but that's the solution. So that's how you make things work. So,
yeah, exactly.
but no, really appreciate all the insights, guys. Really appreciate you guys joining me on here, and can't wait till you guys come out to Indy next time so we can hang out again. I missed you last time, so we'll get together here soon, hopefully. So
Sun King, let's go.
there we go. So all right, fellas, thanks a lot. This is a wrap for this episode of the Indy Investor Pod. We will see you guys next time. Take care.
Thanks.